and I still I still had to wait for YouTube for just a couple seconds. Okay. Hi everybody. I'm back again. I'm here with yeah. For those of you who are just tuning in, have never seen this channel before, I am currently reading my father's manuscripts. That's what's happening. A lot of them are fantasy. There's going to be a few science fiction ones coming down the pipe. I think you've already read one or two of them. I can't remember. It's been a while. It's been a hot minute. um, but the one I'm reading tonight is Flintlock fantasy. Kind of. It's hard to really say it because and this is why it ended up being not being published by like traditional publishers, because it's hard to like market it. Because I'd want to say it has very steampunk feel to it, but it's not steampunk because it's not set in the proper time. So therefore, not really that. Um, it's yeah, I'll call it Flintlock fantasy, and we'll leave it at that. Anyway, tonight I am reading chapter 3. For those of you who are just tuning in and have never seen the show before, I recommend you go back to the previous broadcasts and listen in. If there are any issues with audio or anything like that, please let me know. I've had a couple issues, and I don't think I'm having it this time, but I'm not sure. I can't guarantee, and I want to make sure that I'm providing something decent for everybody. Um, having on the same subject of having sound quality issues, there is going to be a lot of ambient noise. I live in an apartment, and they're very thin walls, and that includes the outside. So you'll hear kids outside, and oftentimes my partner is getting off work, so you'll hear the shower running. I just like to think of it as a relaxing flow of water, like a trickling waterfall. We'll go with that. But if you're hearing anything like that, my point is that hearing that, please ignore, and we'll move on. And yeah, some would say just don't bring attention to it, but I felt remark it once, leave it alone after that. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to launch right in because I have to work on. Because for those of you last night, I again apologize. So many apologies in this one episode, but I was super tired last night. Like super tired. I had no business. I probably should have just like called it quits on the stream, but I want to make sure that I'm building the habit of the streaming. So if I quit on that, but then I don't know. Only time will tell if I go back and listen to yesterday's stream, and it was a hot mess because I was super tired and like really tired. um, but yeah, I'm better today. Yay! Less light stuff, which is why I'm starting at around 6. I'm gonna test seeing how I'm gonna do like I said, anytime between 5 and 7. 7 is like the absolute latest. 7 or 8. 8 o'clock is the latest I ever want to be streaming. If I'm streaming at 8 o'clock, it's bad. Only because, well, on a day where I've been working. Because there will be times later on where I will be streaming in the evening, but that'll be on the weekend, and I will not have worked 8 to 10 hours before I came here. So yeah. Without further ado, though, I'm going to launch into the story. Um, for a quick recap, we are dealing with Jerry Wesson, who is a spy assassin on the run in a world where magic combines with the gunpowder age of, with gunpowder age technology. So there you go. Right now, he is on the run. He is currently on a job with somebody because he is hiding with a group of nomads, and they've sent him off on a mission to help help this family. Not really sure who these people are. There's these three mystery people. Sorry, now there's two because one of them betrayed the other two. Who knew? So, chapter 3 of The Dance of 100,000 Steps. Okay. Okay. Well, actually, we weren't completely safe at first. We were all dressed as Bahali, remember? And the Prush have less use for Bahali than most nations on the continent. The commander of the patrol was a second or third son of some aristocratic, aristocratic, blah, 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 aristocratic family, and seemed on the point of having us shot out of hand and our goods confiscated. Kalis, in flawless aristocratic approach, said, "Lieutenant, you really ought not to do anything hasty." She produced from somewhere a letter from someone important. "You might read this before doing anything irreversible." She ought to have known that she should have had Bralham present this letter, no matter who was the real head of the party. I pressure like that too. All this made the lieutenant more suspicious. Being a mere lieutenant, though, he did the safe thing. He pushed the decision further up the chain of command. He settled for arresting us and having all of our goods carefully cataloged and stored away pending disposal of our case. We ended up at the garrison town of Ardishclag. Oh boy, sorry, Ardishclag. Marched in front of the commandant, Captain Barthali, a graying man with the beginnings of a paunch and a bit of a bad attitude due to having been stuck in a little garrison town chasing the occasional bandit and smuggler. He looked over Kalis's letter. "The woman was carrying this, Commander." Did I mention? Did I mention I was going to be editing? I'm going to be editing. I know this is fascinating video as I'm silently writing. I'm going to make it quick. Okay, let me just quickly reread it so that I can like kind of put in my head. We ended up in the garrison town of Ardishflag, marched in front of the commandant, Captain Barthali, a graying man with beginnings of a paunch and a bit of bad attitude due to having been stuck in a garrison little town chasing the occasional smuggler. Smuglet? A smuggler and a bandler. I promise I'm not tired today. I'm just ridiculous. The one was carrying this, Commander, as he handed the letter to the commander, the commandant, sorry. The commandant looked over Kalis's letter, and said, "This seems to be beyond my authority. We will hold you here until orders can be brought back from headquarters." Kalis gave a small sigh. Bralham a brief frown, but neither tried to argue. I think both of them knew the argument would be counterproductive. So we men were marched away to one set of cells, and Kalis was somewhere else. And Kalis was marched somewhere else. We were kept in a style befitting persons who have done something unknown, but undoubtedly nefarious. I had decided not to worry too much. Someone somewhere was expecting Kalis. That meant that if we were patient as patient we were patient as Kalis's credentials worked their way up the line of command, someone at some point would recognize the name and send word to turn us loose. The rest decided to take the same attitude. This is not to say I wasn't taking note of guard changes in the status of our prison, just in case. "Don't lay everything on one unchangeable plan," said Old Holton had said. "That's asking for sudden death." The uprush, as I understood it, don't go in for summary executions, which does not mean the occasional lieutenant or sergeant doesn't relieve himself of a lot of paperwork with a couple of musket balls. No, we'd be marched before the commandant, who would announce the case against us, hear whatever we had to say, then pronounce sentence. By that time, I should have some notions on how to get away unshot, or relatively so. Stubba seemed to have sunk into a depression, saying little and taking little notice of his surroundings. Tortola seemed to have an eye on everything, though. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Bralham seemed relaxed, and I suspected he was taking the same attitude I was. While we waited, I did some sets of the dance, the sets that could be done in limited spaces. In my younger, more foolish years, I had asked why it was called the Dance of 100,000 Steps. There aren't really 100,000 steps in it, are there? Old Holton had answered. It's a symbolic way of saying a very large number of steps. And further, it's a reference to the journey of life, which requires very many steps. And now that you have delayed me sufficiently, young Jordan, we will begin again. When Kalis's credentials finally reached someone who knew what they meant, a message came back through the magic communicator that brought Captain Barthali down to see the opening of our cells personally. Your pardon, Lord Bralham. A serious mistake has been made. A coach and escort will be provided to see you to your destination. And what of the Lady Kalis? Over-Commander Barthali reddened further and strove harder to pull in his paunch. One of my officers is even now releasing her. Bralham grinned around at the rest of us. Well, I guess we'll be traveling in luxury the rest of the way, lads. There were no orders concerning these, Lord Bralham. There was a bit of headiness on the Overcommander's part. The order likely read, Lord Bralham and party, and he chose to reassert some authority by interpreting it in the light that the Brahali, not being noble, were not part of the party. Brawlham drew himself up, and the comparison with the commander was striking. For one thing, after the long trip most of the Freyant, across most of Freyant, Brawlham had nothing even remotely approaching a paunch. Over commander, you push us a little too far. What will happen if I insist on staying here with these? How soon will an inquiry come down from the capital as to what is keeping us? He didn't bother saying more. It was sufficient to leave it at the overcommander's imagination. With a very poor glance that a minor aristocrat does so well, he muttered, "So they will be released into your custody then." By which he indicated that any misbehavior on our part would be Brawlham's responsibility. Brawlham laughed in his face. "Oh, for certain. I will take the custody of the nefarious band who kept me safe on our trip. And where is the Lady Kalis? Is she also to be released into my custody? We ought to be released into her custody, since she is the ranking member of the party." "She is being taken to my office. You may meet her there." Kalis reached the office first, not having had any of the arguments about who was and was not to be released. I felt sure that her reaction to leaving us there would have been the same as Brawlham's. "Ah, Brawlham, you're well?" "Passable, Callie. I could do with a bath, though, and then a change of clothing." "I think Captain Bartholomew will be willing to go that far in making amends for the accidental delay. Would you not, Overcommander?" Of course, lady." The Overcommander had clearly lost interest in maintaining the fiction that he had anything to say about what happened to us. He'd come to realize that there might be some repercussions to his military career from any report that Kalis and Bralham might give. With standard Apresh efficiency, hot water, soap, and clean clothing were provided for us. While most people look on the Brahali as filthy, the truth is they enjoy being clean as much as the next person, though their traveling existence makes frequent bathing difficult. We were shortly cleaned and dressed and ready to travel. At that point, Stubba turned stubborn. "Little mother entrusted us with the responsibility of seeing you to your destination. I don't see how we can best do that sitting inside a carriage." "We'll have an escort of cavalry." Oh, why can't I ever say that word? I don't know. "We'll have an escort of cavalry, Stuba. All well and good, then they'll be answered to the king of Aprush. We, however, are answerable to the little mother." So we rode horseback, not in the carriage with Brawlham and Kalis. My personal feeling was that Stubba was making a bit much of it, but there was some justification for his attitude. However little aid we'd be against some trouble that could take a troop of cavalry, we'd be even less use inside a carriage, unable to see what was happening. Me? Yes, I would have preferred the chance to be inside the carriage, but as old Holton used to say, you get feeling too put upon by any person, thing, or whatever, you end up letting your attention slip. And when you do that, next thing is someone will slip up beside you and slip a dagger between your ribs. Yes, having an approach of cavalry escort was fine, but I wasn't in the habit of trusting my own welfare to someone else. We went at a fair clip, not having to dodge patrols or the like any longer. I was going to have to stay in Aprush for a while, and though I'd never been there, I knew the language and a great deal about the country. I knew it was different, but I caught a real whiff of what really different was. What was when I heard Trooper Bertrell mentioning around the campfire how Ashkit in Third Troop was swung for supposedly talking revolution. He was shushed by the sub-corporal Ivlar, who warned that if someone got took up for talking out of turn, made me wonder why his messmates didn't turn him in and start looking close at them too. So we rolled along through lowland uprush into the foothills where the dark mountains, the Voltaren, stood purple and snow-capped beyond. There in the shadow of the dark mountains, we came to Hralstadren, Storden, Hralstorden, the capital of Uprush. Hralstorden spread along both banks of the river Hralset, which flowed down out of the mountains. My lessons had told me that the city started on the north bank and eventually spread out onto the south bank. The king still maintained the old palace on the north bank, but it was more often to be found in Drefsur, a much more modern place on the south bank. Architectural style did not differ much in Uprush from what was seen in Freyant, save perhaps for a greater fondness for cottage-style roofs. The larger buildings were mostly done in fieldstone, though there was a good deal of wood used as well. At last we came to a fine modern house, the accommodation of someone of higher rank. It was built of grey fieldstone and took up a large section of the street. Atop of its several pointed towers, a pennant of some noble house hung listlessly. All I could make out was that it was black, or dark blue, on white. The carriage pulled up, and Lieutenant Howdle plied the knocker on the front door. Eventually, a servant answered it. Please announce the arrival of Lord Bralham. Wait, please announce the arrival of Lord Bralham in Dorgustar and Lady Kalis in Theo. He spoke in a loud, carrying military voice, unlike me, which allowed me to find out for the first time just what the first names were for Kalis and Bralham. The family names were Frentish, though the truth was that the noble families of the continent, even the Brigantia, had various connections across various borders. The servant answered in what was, relatively speaking, a mutter, inaudible from where I stood. He turned and went back inside. Stubba was waiting for Kalis to turn and dismiss us. We'd done our job, seen her to her destination, and all we needed was for her to acknowledge the fact. Instead, she came over to where we were standing. Stubba, I won't see you and your men go until you've had a decent meal at least. Take your horses round to the stables, and someone will be waiting for you at the back door. I almost expected him to refuse, but a free meal was a free meal, and I suppose that the little mother expected him to show courtesy as well. He nodded briefly, and we led the horses away. It was a good meal, presided over by a single servant, most likely in an effort to keep backstairs gossip to a minimum. Kalis, Bralham, and the master of the house sat at the table with us. The master was introduced to us by Kalis as my uncle, Valtkad Tarnhend. He will want to add his thanks to mine for getting us here safely. Valtkad Tarnhend was a smallish man, slightly stooped, with a shock of white hair. He wore a dark coat and trousers, and looked much the part of a misanthropic widower. The small man looked around us. He held little expression, but his blue eyes seemed to miss nothing. Yes, indeed. I appreciate the safe delivery of my niece and nephew. I have prepared a small purse for each of you. Yes, I know you came under the orders of your little mother, without expectation of any other reward. I will, however, be insulted if you refuse. The least part of the reward is 20 silver mazers each. Along with them, paper for each of you, signed with my name, stating that you have done me a service, and it would be appreciated if the authorities could take that into account. These papers may be of use to you in Uprush, Brigantia, and some other lands. They will be less useful in Freyant for a while, but I don't suppose you will be hurrying back there in any case. No, it's best you don't mention to me where you're going. You may be pleased to know that my sources tell me that 3 days after you left, there was hardly a Rohal to be found in the immediate neighborhood of Raylan. I suppose you had some expectation of that. And thank you once more for your efforts on behalf of my young relatives. Stuba managed a courteous, "Thank you, sir," in the name of the Brotherhood. He, Kalis, and Bralham raised a glass with us at the end. Hmm. Back at the stables, Stuba gave me a looking over. "Jerry, will you join me and Tortola in a last drink together? I know an inn not far from here where we can be comfortable. And in the name of the Brotherhood, I give you the gray horse. You've done better with it than anyone else ever has." It was so unlike Stuba that I became suspicious. He forced a smile. "Think of it from my point, Jerry. Little mother tells me I'll take some stranger, an outside I don't know, and trust him to help in a dangerous task. But you did your part, maybe even more. You're still an outsider, but worth friendship at least. And the job's done now." "Fine," I said. "I'll be happy to have a drink with the two of you." The Streamside Grove, despite its name, was not near the stream. It was a little run down, though not badly so, and was marked, for those who knew what to look for, as a place that would be friendly to Bahali. In fact, the landlord was a heavy-set man with some Bahali blood in him by his looks, whose patrons knew him as Grinning Khan, because of course he rarely smiled. He was always, at whatever time of day, in need of a shave and sweating with the exertions of going back and forth and overseeing his staff. Excuse me. Stubba, Tortola, and I took a table at the back of the room where we wouldn't stand out. Certainly the innkeeper was friendly to Bahali, but that was all the more reason not to make trouble for him. We didn't have any kind of tearful farewell, just a quick drink and a promise that we'd do what we could for each other if the need ever arose. If the need arose. When they took their leave, I sat there alone. I took out one of the bandit pistols. The one time I'd fired it, it kicked like a mule. So the first thing to do was to clean it properly. That done, I disassembled the firing mechanism, checked all the parts and the springs in particular, and begged a little light oil from the landlord. When I had that pistol in as near fine working condition as possible, I did much the same for the other. I intended to sell the two of the three pistols, and getting them to good working order might just mean difference of a Mazur or two. When I was done that, I saw a broadsheet that someone had left lying around, and went through that. It was a surprise, coming from France, where a broadsheet, if it could get a patron high up enough, if it could get a patron high up enough, could print nearly anything. Here, they were strictly controlled, and all but the mildest reference to the king, the council, or any noble was forbidden. One thing I did get from it was a sneering reference to the political situation in France, where the council had fragmented into factions, and the king didn't seem to have any ability to restore order. I called Con over. Con, I've got a couple pistols to sell. He frowned. Dark stuff? Not Naprush. I took them off a couple bandits over in France. They don't have maker's marks from any well-known gun makers, so they weren't made special for anyone. Hmm. Well, that sort of provenance. You'd best take him off to the Hallgrind. He's a gunsmith, and not above dealing in secondhand goods. With his directions, I made a way to a dingy little shop, from which came the sounds of metalwork. The proprietor, old and lean, somewhat nearsighted, peered at me as I came in. With the clothing they give me back in Artischklag, and without the turban, I didn't look Bahali. However, I didn't look like the sort of customer to have any dealings with a quality gunsmith. I probably looked like some kind of small-time peddler, perhaps even a thief. Con suggested you might be in the market for a couple of pistols. Con ought to know better. I don't buy stolen goods. These were brought over from France. I can't guarantee that they weren't stolen at some point, but their maker's marks are French, and I doubt anyone will be coming this far looking for them. The usual form would be for me to give fervent assurances that the things hadn't been stolen, and that an old uncle had left them to me in his will. But it didn't seem to be worth the bother to me. In fact, I had a nebulous plan for which that sort of thing would be fatal. A couple of mazers for the pistols would be fine with me if I could manage something more than one petty deal. Huh, hardly a ringing endorsement. Do they work? Of course. I've cleaned them and taken the works apart and oiled them a bit. Very little wear, and the springs are in good condition. He gave me a look. And you're trying to sell them to me? So you'd say anything different? No, I'll want to check them myself. Of course. If you'll lend me a screwdriver, I'll take them apart and show you. It was going better than I had hoped. You will, eh? Very interesting. Not thinking of setting yourself up in competition with me, are you? He slid a screwdriver across the counter to me. Not hardly. I can take them apart and clean them, but I know my limitations. The screwdriver made the job a little. Oh, the screwdriver made the job easier than it had been back in the inn, using the point of my knife. He watched with careful attention as I took them apart, displayed the parts that were vulnerable to wear, and the springs. Then I put the two weapons back together again. 2 mazers for the pair of them. 2 mazers each. He shook his head. French marks from who knows who, and the provenance? 2 mazers and 2/8 for the both. 2 mazers and 3/4. 2 mazers and a half. Done. He gave me the money, I gave him the goods. Each of us satisfied with the bargain, more or less. Then I said, I'm looking for work. Could you use a helper here? His eyes widened a fraction. For the massive amount of business you see me doing here, I have 2 assistants, and just managed to keep them fed. That had been a bit much to hope for, but there was still some small chance I might get something out of it. I'm new in town. You know of anybody who might be hiring? I'm not too proud to sweep floors, if it gets me enough to live on. Since I'd shown some degree of honesty and the ability to work with tools, he was a little more willing to help than he might have been. Clockmaker Ach- Achenball over in Blackbird Lane. He might just be able to help to use you. If you know things other than guns, that is. Clocks I haven't had that much to do with, but I think I could learn. He nodded. You go over there, tell him I sent you. He said Said he might find you handy if you show up well. He might just give you a try. I thanked him and I left. Clockmaker Action Ball was a chubby little man, bald as an egg, his clothing showing small spots of oil. He smiled a greeting at me. Then his face changed when he saw me in my clothing. And what do you want? Gunsmith Holgren sent me. He said you might be willing to hire me. Did he then? And just what did he think he might do for me here? Make fine clocks, sweep floors, or just watch me while I work? I'm hardly with I'm handy with tools and parts and I can learn. With some training, that could possibly help with repairs. Think a lot of yourself, do you? Do repairs, eh? Then that means sweeping and cleaning will be beneath your dignity, I assume? Not at all. I'll do anything so long as it pays an actual living wage. Oh, and you intend to get rich off me then? I'm not concerned with being rich, but I do hope to do better than starve in the street. With some people, you have to stand up for yourself, not giving insult for insult, but not letting them walk over you either. So I just answered his provocative statements with simple statements of facts as I saw them. After all, though I'd prefer to work in a shop such as this, I was hale and strong, and I could shift bales in a warehouse if necessary. He gave me a long, slow look. So, you're hired then. Don't expect to be able to set up a competition with me next week. This is an art, and it takes years, a lifetime really, to learn. First of all, show me some artistry with that broom over there. We haven't agreed on wages. Wages, is it? Quarter measure a day, paid at the end of every week. I shook my head. Quarter measure will only slow down my starving in the street. Say half a measure, and I pick up the broom. Hmm, half a measure then. Does that satisfy you, soon to be wealthy broom wielder? Which told me I could have held out for 3/4 a day, but let him have his triumph. Done. I went and picked up the broom. Grouchy and as persnickety as he was, Action Ball began training me before the end of the first week. Come over here, young Jordan, he'd say. Now look at this lot. What do you see? See this little doohickey here? It's broken away from its spindle. We'll have to replace the whole thing. Put the broken part in the barrel over there for the scrap metal man to pick up. Now, back to your sweeping. After the second week, he had entrusted me with taking the back off the clock so he could see what was wrong. Of course, I could have done more, but I didn't press him. That would just put his back up and make it even more difficult to get anywhere. For certain, there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere in the shop, and the windows glistened. After the second week as well, he entrusted me with deliveries. Most people brought their clocks in and picked them up, or if they'd ordered a clock, came and picked it up when it was ready. Some families, however, expected not to have to be bothered with another trip. And for these, Aschenball added a few quarter measures to the bill and had them delivered. With me close at hand, so to speak, he didn't bother with calling some young lad from the street and giving him a minim for the delivery. Okay. Ta-da! Yeah, that's a shorter chapter. Mm, ta-da! So I think the other chapters might be longer. I'm not really sure. But um, that is all for tonight's stream. shorter episode, but we'll see what tomorrow's like. This is what happens when I don't read them ahead of time, which is all the time because it it wouldn't be me editing them if I had read them ahead of time because that would defeat the whole entire purpose of this exercise that I'm doing right now. Yes, it's an exercise. I am reading it in order to kind of get an idea of things that need to be changed around, things that need to be edited, words that need to be removed, that sort of thing. How does it sound? What is the structure like? It's like a live reading slush pile. Only I'm reading the whole entire story and marking it up as we go. So, thank you everybody for tuning in as always, and I will talk to everybody tomorrow night. Thank you. Good night.